Hello, I wanted to jump on today and record a video of me editing a few different images from a session that was quite green. So as you can see, this was held in a beautiful flower field, and the greens here where we live at the moment are super vibrant, very yellow. It's been very wet. So lots of my sessions that are outdoors have got green grass and trees that are this bright. And I wanted to jump on because I know greens are always a bit of a tricky thing to edit. So I wanted to show you a few of my favorite presets from the Kindred pack. And these are my go-tos when I'm editing greens. So I just wanted to show you today a few different presets and how I would use them in these situations. And yeah, the adjustments that I make when I'm working with greens. And I'm going to show you some examples of Marlow, Juniper and Goldie, which are my favorite three presets when I'm editing in like more green environments. So I'll give you a little bit of a look at the before and afters of those and what they each look like on the photos. So starting with this one, I am going to jump in here and use the Marlow full preset. So in the Kindred pack, I've got full versions and soft versions. So the full versions are pretty much the strong version of the preset without any of the presence panel adjustments made. So these are like a cleaner edit. They don't have any grain in them and they don't have any texture clarity or dehaze applied. Whereas the soft version is exactly the same preset, same color base and everything. It just has the presence panel adjustments. Also a little bit, it's not as sharp, and it also has some grain in it as well. So I love these, but today I probably will show you more of the full versions and the adjustments that I would make. So when I edit an image, I start with applying the preset and then I pretty much work through the panel here. So I will apply the preset first and then I will adjust my exposure. So this one I'm going to bring up the exposure to around about there. And then I will change the white balance. So I think for this one, I'm going to bring it down to around about there. And I personally don't use the dropper. You can use the dropper on a neutral spot in the image. I prefer to do it just myself by sight and the feel of the image. And that's how I've always done my white balance. And I print regularly so I can check like what that looks like. But yes, I don't use the dropper method personally. So that is pretty much the white balance that I would go with. And then because I do like a little bit more of a softer look, I'm going to apply the haze tool from the pack, which makes some presence adjustments in this panel here. Drop the dehaze. I'm going to straighten this up a tiny bit and then come in here and grab my subject enhance brush. It's like a mask that will choose the subject and gives a little pop to the subject. So you can come up here and you can see that's with it off and then on. So you can turn it off and on there. So I'm going to warm them up just a tad as well. And I will probably leave it there because their overalls and her dress are blue. I'm going to jump in here and just change the blues a little bit and the aqua just to bring that color back. And another thing that I often will do, because this has got aqua and blue in it, is jump into here and in the hue, because I want to bring back some of the blues, grab this little tool here, come over the color and actually use my mouse slider that I'm using and pull that up and down. And as you can see, it's actually changing the aqua and the blue there on the side. So I'm going to adjust it probably to around about there. And that is, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's Marlow, that's a before and after with Marlow. So it has more of a warm base. The greens are a little bit more desaturated and yellow, and they're not as vibrant as some of the other presets. So this is the same photo. I just wanted to show you a different edit with this one. So Juniper is a much like cooler green based preset. Really beautiful preset. I love this one. And I use this outdoors a lot in locations like this and also for beach shoots. So I'm going to apply the preset, make my straightening adjustments, I'm going to bring the exposure up to around about there. And it's feeling a tiny bit green, so I'm going to bring back a little bit of tint, magenta tint into the photo, probably at that point. And I will come over and get my Subject Enhance mask and apply that. And that's giving them a little bit of pop. I am going to grab that mask, I'll turn it on here so you can see, and I'm going to change the temperature and actually warm them up just a tiny bit. So just about there, and I think that looks really good. So that was super simple. So I'm going to give you a quick look. That is the Juniper preset, and this is the Marlowe preset. So you can see that this is a cooler based preset, has more cool tones, and it's not as orange in terms of like, doesn't have any orange split toning in it, and it's more on the green tint side of things as well, whereas this one has more magenta in it. The greens are a little bit more desaturated, and it's more of a warmer preset with more pink undertones. So it totally depends on style and what you love. But yes, in the Kindred pack, there is a whole lot of different presets that work really well for greens depending on the type of look that you're going for. So here is another one. Come back here. So this spot was so beautiful and lush, but yes, the greens were super vibrant. I'll just reset that. Here we go. So on this one, I might start out again. I will show you Marlowe on this one. So Marlowe is the more orange, warmer based preset in the pack, but this is super versatile. Marlowe is one of my go-tos for lots of different things. So that's Marlowe Full. I'm going to add in some haze because I love that. A little bit of grain, and I feel like the exposure is pretty good on that one. I might bring the temperature down just a touch. And I feel like adding some vibrancy to these flowers. So once again, if I come over here, and with vibrancy, I actually want to make them a little bit brighter. So I'm going to grab my saturation and click on this little button here and pull up my mouse. And you can see that's actually changing. It's got red and magenta and a little bit of orange in there too. So it just helps to not have to choose every single color. This is how I often adjust the colors in my photo. And so I will leave that there just to give that a bit more of a pop. And I think that looks pretty good. So that is Marlowe. And then on this one here, I might give you a little look at Goldie. So this is Goldie Full. So this one again is a little bit more similar to Juniper. It's a cooler based edit. The greens are more true to life and they're not as warm, but they definitely are softened a little bit. So that is the before and this is the after. That's just with the one click of the preset. So it's done a lot of the heavy lifting to start with. I'm going to add some haze and grain back into that. And I'm feeling like the blacks are quite deep here and a little bit rich. So I'm going to bring up the blacks a little bit and maybe bring up the shadows and just kind of soften this a little bit. And I'm going to use my Subject Enhance tool here, which is an AI mask, and that has given her a little bit of a pop, but she's looking a tiny bit bright. So I'm going to bring her down probably to around about there. And I always check before and afters to make sure that skin tones are still looking really good and then haven't deviated too much away from what their actual skin tone is, because that is always super important. So that is pretty much how I would leave that. I might make a little bit of an adjustment to her skin here and just almost maybe pull it down. I feel like it's looking, the luminance is maybe a tiny bit high. Okay, beautiful. So that is the Marlowe preset and that is the Goldie preset. So that's, yeah, just gives you a good idea of the different presets and what you can achieve if you're going for a certain kind of look with the greens. So I'll come in and do this one. come down here. So for this one, I might start with Juniper. So that looks really beautiful off the bat. So I've tested these out on lots of different skin tones because skin tones are one of the biggest things that are super important to get right. If your skin tone's off in a photo, it will look completely off, and obviously it's not a good thing either. So for your client to feel like their skin tone looks completely different. So skin tones which have like the oranges, the yellows, orange, yellow, and red in them, they have always been something that I've focused on when creating the preset. So I'm hoping that you're finding your skin tones are a little bit easier when you use the presets, easier to balance out. So that is pretty great. That is with Juniper Full without a lot of adjustments at all. I might come in here and use my haze tool because I just love softening. I hate photos having a really digital look. So I do love bringing down some of that sharpness and clarity that can happen with mirrorless cameras. So that's pretty much why I created these haze tools, to kind of reduce that look a little bit. If you love that look, don't use the haze tools. That's totally fine. So that is with Juniper, and I think that looks amazing. So that's the before, that is the after. So the greens in that one are nice and cool. I actually really love the greens in this one. I'm not a big fan of like super minty greens, but not too yellow. So it's always a bit of a balance, finding the right green. Okay, so in this one, I'm going to use Marlowe to give you a bit of a different look. This is the warmer version in the pack. So bring my exposure up, bring the temperature down, probably around about there. And I feel like it's a little bit magenta. So I'll bring that back down, bring the tint down to there. That's looking pretty good. I am going to add a bit of haze back in. And if you did want to change the greens a little bit, so what I'll often do in here, if I want to play around with the greens, is come in and play with the luminance of the yellow and the green, because in a lot of greens, it's actually predominantly a yellow color. It's not actually green. So if you've been trying to mess around with your greens and change the color of them, and you're not finding that they're changing too much when you modify this slider, it's often because there's actually a lot of yellow in them as well. So if you come into the yellow color panel slider here, you will see, if you move these around, how much the yellow actually affects the greens. So we might bring that up a little bit, brighten that up. I'm going to bring the luminance up again, and I'm actually going to bring those greens back towards the yellow a little bit and increase the yellow. And I think that looks great. So I'm going to show you before and afters. Bring these up here just so you can see the different styles of edits that you can get with the Kindred pack of presets. So this is the warmer version, that was Marlowe, and this one here was, what do we use, Goldie or Juniper, one of those, but a more of a cooler based green. So they both look great. And I'm going to come in here. I put a few indoor photos in here just to show you how they work on an indoor location as well. So I'm going to try Marlowe full on this one. So I often will apply the preset and then make adjustments in the basic panel first. So I'm going to bring up the exposure for this one, probably to around about there. I will apply my haze because I love that. I will bring in a little bit of grain. And I think the white balance is actually pretty good for this one. I'm going to bring it back, make it a tiny bit cooler. And I will get my subject enhance brush or AI mask as well. And that's just created a beautiful bit of pop. I'm going to come in here, and I only ever remove scratches and things that won't be there like in a month or two. I'll never remove like a freckle or anything. Sometimes it is tricky to tell what it is on someone's face. I have in the past like messaged a mum and just asked if it's a freckle or a scratch or something on a child's face, just because I don't ever want to remove something that is not, something that isn't actually temporary. If it is part of their skin, I am not about airbrushing and removing all of those different things, because that's part of who they are. So that's how I edit, and I do have to check sometimes, because sometimes it can be tricky to see. But because this one is a beautiful portrait, I will come in here because he's looking straight at me. I'm going to zoom in. And if you didn't know how to change the zoom, you can come over here and zoom in at all different levels. So I usually have mine on 200, but if you wanted to come in super close, you can change it here as well to get in really, really close. So we will leave this at 200. I'm going to press K on my keyboard, and I'm going to grab the brushes. So these are the Storykeeper brushes. I'm going to get the eye brush and come in here and use that on his eyes. It's so funny sometimes when I'm doing photos like this, because I can see my reflection in their eye, which is always hilarious. But yeah, there we go. So I think that looks really good. I would probably come in here and also use the skin brush. These are really great. They're nice and subtle, but they just kind of add like a beautiful softness to the skin and smooth the skin out a tiny bit. So often I'll just use the light one. This is the medium, so I will just brush this over the parts that I want. And depending on the type of light in a photo, you can have can be quite harsh on the skin. This is like side light. There was a big window over here. So I'm just going to use this brush on his face and on Mum's arms. And I think I will stop there. So that is the before and that is the after. So that's pretty much all that I would do. I don't pretty much ever take my photos into Photoshop. I love editing in Lightroom, and it's always worked for me. So I have never needed to head over to Photoshop to obviously I could if I wanted to make some other changes, but I do everything in Lightroom, and I found that works really well for me. Okay, so I was just going to show you this photo with a different preset. So we used Marlowe on that last one. So I'm going to use Juniper on this one, which has more of that green cooler base. I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit. I might actually cool it down just a touch, probably around there. Bring back a little bit of tint because it was on the green side a tiny bit too much. So I would probably leave it there, and I would go through all of the same adjustments that I did on that previous photo in terms of the skin and the little marks on his face. But yes, you can see if we come in here, pull this one up. So that was Juniper, the more green cool base one, and this was Marlowe if you're wanting a more warmer pink based edit. So I love both of them, and that's what's always hard, is because you have to, not that you have to decide on one style, but sometimes it can be tricky when you love different kinds of edits, and the more that you edit, you kind of try and find some consistency across all of your photos. But if you want to try something different for different shoots, absolutely go for it. I am a big advocate of editing depending on the feel of the shoot, rather than just boxing yourself in and using one preset for every single thing that you do. So I will often use different presets and across different environments and different shoots depending on how I'm feeling and the lighting, and just, yeah. So that is totally fine to do that. As long as your work overall, like your body of work, looks quite consistent, I think that, yeah, edit 100% how you want and how the session feels to you. So for this one, I am going to come in and give Marlowe a go. I'll use Marlowe Soft just to give you a look. I'm going to bring that up. I might actually bring the grain, remove some of the grain. So I'm going to bring that back down to that level and bring the shadows up. Now I'm going to grab the Subject Enhance tool over here. And this is actually amazing. I can't believe that I used to like hand brush people when now we can just grab them so quickly using these masks. It's amazing. So I'm going to bring the exposure down. I'm going to warm them up a tiny bit. I'm actually going to add a little bit more contrast back. And if I press enter, that will turn that off. And I think that looks pretty good like that. This day it was like pouring rain, so that's why the sky is so cloudy. So I would come in here. These are actually raindrops. It was about to start bucketing on us. So that is the before and that is the after. And this is using Marlowe. So this is just to give you a good idea of what the presets do to quite a green environment. So I feel like they work really well and you're not losing all your greens and they're not super desaturated, but they're not as crazy vibrant. So that's Marlowe. And this one here, I will give you a quick look at using Juniper on this one. So I will apply Juniper and then I will come in and crop. I'm terrible at keeping things level in camera because ideally I would have the top of this house still in the photo and not cropped out, but that's all right, happens. I could probably use the new AI tool in Photoshop to fix that if I wanted to. So I'm going to brighten this up a little bit and I'm going to warm it up. I'm going to bring back a little bit of magenta into the photo as well and grab my masking tool once again, my subject enhance tool. Did that apply? I don't know. Did it apply? Let's see. It did apply. That was really quick. Okay. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit and warm them up a bit, probably to around about there. I'm going to add my haze back in and I feel like that is looking pretty good. So that's the before, that's the after. If you wanted to play around with the greens, once again, like I said before, you want to come in here and mainly adjust the yellow sliders. So I'll just show you what this looks like. So I'm bringing this back down. It's actually changing the greens a lot. They're looking a lot pinker. If you like more mintier greens, you're going to want to change the hue over to the right side here. So I'm probably going to leave it. So the luminance is the brightness of a color. The hue is like the tonal range of a color and the saturation is like the vibrancy of a color. So we bring it around about to there and just play around with it until you find a green that you're loving. So if you want mintier greens and you like your greens, if you bring it all the way over here, it's obviously, that's very intense, but it's a good way to see what the slider is actually affecting. So if you want it to be a little bit greener and cooler, you can bring it over there. And that is what that looks like. So that is with Marlowe. And that is, this one here is with Juniper. So just to give you an idea of how they work. So this was another one I was going to show you. This is Marlowe Full. Looks beautiful right from it just being applied. I'm going to make the adjustments to the exposure. I would probably leave that just around there. Now often in whites, if this was quite a sunny day, I might get a lot of color cast in the white. I feel like it's pretty good at the moment. It does look a little bit cool. So sometimes I will grab the brush by pressing K and come over and I'm going to actually just warm up the whites a little bit. So I'm going to brush that all over her dress and bring the exposure down just one notch of 10 and I think that looks great. So that is Marlowe with just a few adjustments. So it works really, really well. The skin tones look beautiful. So that's the before, that's the after using Marlowe. And yeah, the greens are awesome in that one as well. And it's just reduced their intensity the right amount. So I will show you Goldie as well on this one. So that is Goldie applied, exposure adjusted. This one is a cooler edit, so I'm going to warm it up just a tiny bit, and I might actually bring up the shadows because Goldie is a little bit deeper. Not harsh, but the blacks are a little bit deeper and the shadows are a little bit deeper. So I'm going to bring that up to around about there, and I might warm that up just a tiny bit. And I think that looks great. And you could reduce, if you wanted to bring down the saturation of these greens a tiny bit more, I might bring that down and grab the yellow. And as you can see, if I remove all of the yellow, there's no green left. So there we go. I might bring it to around about there and brighten it up just a tiny bit. So that is the before and that is the after using the Goldie full preset. Okay. This was one other one that was an indoor shoot at the same location because it was raining. So I only had this corner to put them in, and there was these beautiful windows, but obviously we had green glass in them, so there was a lot of color cast, which was very tricky in some of the photos to edit. But I just wanted to show you how I would edit these. So using Marlowe, that is Marlowe full, and it actually has worked really well with the color cast already. So I would apply that, bring up the exposure, bring down the temperature, probably to around about there, straighten it up a little bit. Now I feel like they are too bright, but the background seems to be exposed where I want it. So what I'm going to do is grab my Subject Enhance tool and apply that, and then come over here to masks, and I really like how that is applied, but I'm going to actually bring the exposure down a tiny little bit and the highlights. So that is looking pretty good. Might bring the tint down a little bit from the magenta side, and I feel like she's looking a little bit orange. So once again, I'm always going back and forward. So I use the / key on my keyboard, and that will show me the before and the after. And I'm going to come in here, grab my oranges and reduce the saturation of the orange just a tiny bit. And I feel like that is looking pretty good. I'm actually going to, as you can see in the before, there was more yellow in the flowers, and the preset has removed a lot of that yellow. So I'm actually going to bring that back a little bit. So if I bring that up, now I don't want to bring heaps of yellow back into here and affect the color cast. So what I sometimes will do is grab a brush, brush it onto the area with these flowers. So I'm just brushing that all over the flowers, and I'll turn it on so you can see. And I'm going to change the temperature. So if I play around with the temperature here, warm them up a tiny bit, and then I come in here and play with the hue slider. So I actually want to bring back more of the yellows. So I'm going to slide it over here, and I always pretty much use just the fine adjustments. I always have this selected. If you don't have that selected, you can make really big sweeping adjustments to the color, but I much prefer to make the fine adjustments. I just find that it only ever needs the fine adjustments. So I'm going to bring that just over there, probably to that point. And that's just brought back some of the yellows and some of the greens in the flowers that were removed from the other adjustments that we made. So that is the before, that is the after, and that was using Marlowe. So that actually did really well with this green color cast. You can see a little bit there on her leg. So what I would do is grab a new brush by pressing K on my keyboard, come in here, and to reduce magenta, I want to, if I select this brush here, it's going to change the tint, and it's going to bring in a little bit more green and reduce, I'm mixed up. I'm wanting to reduce the greens and bring in more magenta. So that's why I chose that brush that over and make some adjustments. And there we go. That is looking pretty good. So I will move on to the next one. I might not go over that one again. This was a beautiful photo taken through a window. So this is like reflection from the outside. So I will just show you how I would edit this. I might try and use, which one will I use for this? Goldie. I'll often just hover over a few different ones and see what's going to work, and then I'll find the edit that I love and sync it across all of the photos. I feel like Marlowe looks beautiful on this one. So I'm going to apply the preset and change the exposure. I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit, and I'm going to crop that in a little bit more. Just be careful not to crop out limbs, and I think if I spend a bit of time, I could remove that. I think that's my reflection, which I'm always really mindful not to get in the photo. But it was quite tricky on this day. So I'm going to come in there and grab my subject enhance tool, and that has created a beautiful amount of pop. So that's looking pretty good. I might cool it down just a tiny bit. And I do maybe want to bring back a little bit of these yellows. So I might come in here and get, no, I think I'll just get the brush and paint it on myself and just make the adjustments. So that is painted on pretty well, and I'm going to warm that up a little bit and change the hue. So I'm going to bring the hue slider back over here to when it feels right, and that has introduced a little bit more of the green and yellow back into the flowers, which is what I wanted, just so that it balances it out a little bit more. Totally personal preference, but I think that looks really beautiful. So I'm going to come through to the next one. I won't edit that one as well. This will be the last one in the pack, so I will give you a little look at this one. I'm going to come in here and use, I'll start with Marlowe again. Apply Marlowe, bring up the exposure, and pretty much bring up some of the shadows. And I feel like the temperature is actually pretty good on this one, so I might just leave it there. I feel like they are a little bit bright, so I could grab my subject brush, my subject mask, or I could press M on my keyboard, which opens up a linear mask, and just bring down the exposure a little bit on this side of the photo to kind of even it out a bit more. I think that looks pretty good, and I'll just raise it up there. So with the greens, I'm really happy with that. Obviously, if you wanted to play around with the greens, once again, you can brighten them up here. So that's quite deep and dark when you have your luminance pulled down all the way. So you can brighten them up here, increase the saturation of the greens, or pull that right down. Now, if we're going to leave it maybe around there, because you don't want to have no greens at all, it just looks quite unnatural. So it's like finding the right balance. And I'm going to bring the slider back that way a little bit and reduce the yellows probably to around about there, and bring up the luminance a little bit. So that is the before and that is the after. So I think that looks really beautiful. I really love greens. I don't love fully desaturating them, which was the trend for a long time. But yes, I do love kind of balancing them out so they're not overpowering, but still there in the photo, looking quite natural, especially in an environment like this where it was so beautiful here and I wanted to actually highlight the location as well and not to actually make it too different to how it looked and felt on the day. So this is with Juniper, so I've just applied that, changing the temperature. I think pretty happy with how the greens look in that. So I'm going to maybe bring the exposure up just a tiny bit. Once again, they're looking quite bright. The other thing that you can do, there's a whole lot of different masks that you can do, but if you press Shift and M on your keyboard, you can open up a radial mask. So this is just another way that you can select a section in your image and change the exposure or any other adjustments in here. So I'm going to leave that around about there. And you can grab this at any time and you can actually move it around or duplicate it. Right, there, looks pretty good. I might bring the highlights down just a tiny bit. So that is Juniper, and I will give you a quick look one last time. So that is Juniper on this photo, and this one here is Marlow. So you can see it's a little bit warmer, more pink undertones, and this one is a little bit cooler with more green undertones. So I hope that you've found that really helpful, and it's given you a good idea of how you can edit in different locations that have got lots of green with the Kindred presets. If you have any questions, just leave them below and I'm more than happy to help. Thanks, guys.